Hey, this is Hayes Anderson, and this is the Isla Instruments S2400 sampler. It is the spiritual successor to the EMU SP1200 sampler, which came out in 1987. Back in 1987, a friend of mine had this awesome keyboard, and I was able to use it back then. He has given it to me now and entrusted me with it to restore it, hopefully. I will. And give it back to him. I will. And I just wanted to point this out because this is where I started sampling, right here with this device. And of all things, it was about 1987. Also want to point out this Roland MS-1. I got this in 1995, and I used it with my drum set. I had a band, and we played live, and I actually used this for our live shows. I was able to trigger sounds from my electronic rolling kit through the MIDI ports. Very nice. Now, you may know that these are the two samplers that I normally use in my setups, and I'm not really using the Korg Vocasample so much anymore because the MIDI implementation finally frustrated me too much. This sampler is only 32 kilohertz. It's 16-bit, but it's only 32 kilohertz, and it does that to save space. But it's very interesting because you do lose a little bit of the highs. However, it has this analog filters which allow you to add a little bit of treble back. Somehow it's like magic. And I point out the Akai MPX8 because this is the most measly of the Akai samplers, and this is actually a really nice little sampler. If you can pick this up used for $50, I'd grab one if you don't already have one. I wouldn't trust the MIDI implementation on it. I've heard all kinds of bad things about it, but the pads are pretty responsive, and I just use this for phrase sampling. Now, why do I bring all of this up? Well, I bring all this up because the question arose to me, why do I need a sampler like this luxurious S2400? I've also got these handy little pocket operators like the PO33 and the PO35. Well, it did occur to me that out of all the samplers that you saw, minus the very first one which doesn't belong to me, that I don't really have a huge workhorse type kind of sampler, nothing that can really hold all of my samples if I wanted it to actually do real sampling. I mean, this is the only sampler that I had that could actually sample, if you see what I'm saying. Everything else had different interfaces. For example, the MPX8 and the Vocasample, both of those, you have to load your samples in via computer through like an SD card or some other interface. And I will, back up. This one you can sample with it, but we're not going to include the pocket operators in this. I didn't really have a device that was a really awesome sampler. Back in the mid-90s when I was in college learning this stuff, we used one of the Akai S1000s. I think it was a rack model unit, and it used floppy disks. Pretty cool stuff. That was a quote-unquote high quality at 41.5 kilohertz 16-bit. And all these sample rates, why do I bring all this up? Trust me, this is all going somewhere. Because that is kind of part of the magic that is this particular device, is the sample rate and the bit rate. It took a year for this to arrive. You have to understand it was a pre-order. When I ordered it, none of these were even made. They were still in beta. It took a year for this thing to arrive, and of course, things change within the span of a year. And when I finally got this thing, well, the price had increased quite a lot, and I was tempted to sell it. Now, before I sell anything, I sit back and say to myself, okay, I need to make sure I understand what it is that I have. I will confess that when I bought this thing, I did not do any homework on the SP1200. I just kind of thought that it was, like most samplers, just something sort of like along an evolution line in a sense. Like, for example, you may not know that this was the predecessor to the SP202. I was kind of stuck with this decision, wow, do I really want to keep this thing or do I want to sell it? This thing is huge, by the way. When I got this, I had thought, well, maybe I'm going to replace the Lyra 8, and the Lyra 8 is about this wide compared to the S2400. I literally have no room over here where my studio is, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a rolling cart for this thing. But you're not here in this video for any of that kind of stuff. I want to demonstrate the sampling and two features which are the reasons why I decided to keep this thing. Those two features are resampling and multimode. So I think I'm going to start, we're just going to get a new project going. So we can do that by going to File and just say New Project. Let's call it Project 4. Okay, great. I already have a slice of the piece of music that we're going to sample. And it's a stereo slice, it's CD quality, and I arranged all of that in Audacity. And I'm going to assign it to this pad. And it's something that you may be familiar with. Not that one, of course. Here we go. We're listening for three things here: bass drum, snare drum, and hi-hat. Another thing that I want to do really quickly is I want to change the tempo. And I happen to know that this is 71 or 143 or whatever. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So what I want to do now is sample what you just heard. And I have the WAV file on my iPod here. So to do that, we're going to go into Sample. And I'm not using the internal digital gain on the S2400. Instead, I'm using my color box as a preamp and an EQ. Now, normally what I do when I'm sampling in this manner is I would create a loop and then have Audacity loop that over and over and over again and then record that in. And the reason why I would do that is because I would more effectively be able to apply EQ and gain to it and make sure that I'm not getting any clipping and I'm getting the sound that I want. I've already done that off screen, however, so this should be mostly ready to go to sample. What I need to do, however, is I just need to change the threshold on this thing. I want to take the threshold like all the way down, and I want to do everything manually. So I'm going to hit record, it's going to start sampling, and then I'm going to play and I'm going to stop. It says sample is okay on the screen. I'm not sure if you can see that. If it was clipping, it would tell me that there was clipping. So here is the sample. Okay, so I'm going to adjust the start point. And this is actually pretty nice. I hope you can see this on the screen. I can zoom in very easily and get to the zero crossing point. Now I can go to my end point and zoom in pretty much the same way. And that should be it. That's pretty good. Now I'm going to save it. And we're going to change the name. Oh yeah, here's the name. And I actually like how you enter the name. You're not here to see that, of course. We're going to call this Levy. Future update coming soon. We're going to be able to plug in a keyboard via USB and just type the name in. That's pretty slick. But I can just do it this way. It's not too bad. Deciding what the last character is, of course, is kind of a little weird. You just leave it alone and hit save. So I'm going to my new project, and I want to assign it to this track, and we'll save file. Hit back a few times, and we should be ready to go. So, do these sound different? That's the original. So that's kind of like CD quality, you know, straight out of the box. And here's the one that I sampled. Alright, I really don't think this first one was stereo for whatever reason. I mean, it's supposed to be stereo, but, you know, there's a number of things that I could have messed up in the process of doing this. This is not the final home for the SB1200. Anyways, everything is just a temporary setup. Okay, so the color box is out of the way now. We've got our sample. Now, I sampled this at 48 kilohertz. It's still not going to, you know, there's not going to be any difference. The original was 41. I mean, there will be a little difference actually because I'm going through the color box, and any additional coloration and harmonics that it might have added might get picked up in that additional headroom up there. This is not really necessary though. That's just like so minor, you're not even going to notice it, especially when other things get mixed in. Think about it like this. You've got a sampler, you've got your computer, you've got the ability to store files on your computer and edit files with whatever software that you're using. It's very easy to manage everything with your computer, and then just take the files over, untouched, clean files over to your sampler, and not have to worry about anything. By recording things and going through all of this extra signal processing, I'm introducing all kinds of room for error. It sounds pretty good though. In fact, it sounds a little brighter, a little crisper. Okay, so, but that's kind of what I was trying to say before. You know, you could do everything with your computer and just copy the files over. In fact, this even has a an interface where you can connect the USB to your computer and just drag files back and forth. I think if you're going to make your own drum sets, if you're going to sample and do that to sort of make your own, or to start the bass to create your own sounds, then it's probably best to do things a little weird. Like, you know, don't go stereo, do go mono, do take it through some kind of your own preamp and add your own color to it. Okay, so let's get to resampling. So what is resampling all about? So what's interesting about the old school SP1200 is that it was 12-bit and it sampled at 26 and some change. Going back to the MS1, the reason why you would choose lower sample rates is so you can have more storage. This has like a nice 8 megabit cartridge to go with it, but I think this thing could store up to like maybe 10 minutes total sample time at a low resolution rate. At the highest rate, I could get maybe with that card a total of 60 seconds of sample time. I'd have to look that up again. It wasn't a lot at all. The Korg Volca sample has very, very limited. I think it's only something like 4 megabytes or something, the total space in that thing. And the MPX8, I'm using a 4 gigabyte card in this thing. I think it might use an 8 or a 16. I don't think it will use a 32 or anything higher than that. I can have like a terabyte SD card in this thing and pretty much just store all of my samples and have this be the complete total master library. Now then, the thing about resampling is that it's trying to retain that old school flavor from the original SP1200. Really though, there's another trick, and some of you may already know what it is. I mean, people coming from the MPC world, I'm sure you guys do this too, SP404, same kind of thing, and that is where you speed up what you're sampling and then you sample it in. So if the sample used to be this long, by speeding it up you shrink it down about this far, and then once you get it into the machine you can repitch it and get it back to its original pitch in a sense and length, and now you're able to store more samples into memory. But with this particular device, what they've put into this is the ability to have that trick, and what they call it is 33 at 45. It's emulating you taking a phonographic player, coming into the back of the phono jacks and playing your 33 LP at the 45 speed so that you speed it up. Once you get it into the sampler, then you can pitch it down and get it back to the regular speed. And it's really cool because this will do all of that with the resample feature, which I'm about to show you right now. So if I come into this particular sample and I go to assign, there's an option for me to resample here. So I go to resample, and now you may not be able to see it on the screen, but there's an option for me to pitch like 33 at 45. And it's really cool because I can actually pitch the shift to anything I want to. It doesn't have to be 33 at 45. Now this number is 5.37. I'm not sure if that's in cents. I would think it might be, but I don't know. Once I have all this set, it's going to resample this to 26K 12-bit, and it's going to shift the pitch to 5.37, and we're going to begin resampling, and you're going to hear it actually doing its thing. And it says okay, and we're done. Okay, so here's the original, supposed to be stereo sample from the CD. Here's what I sampled from the iPod. Now the reason why it sounds brighter and clearer is just because I added my own color to it. And now finally, here is the resampled version of what you just heard. Hopefully you can hear some graininess there. I'm going to do these two again. Big difference. And let's do the CD one more time. Okay, so all of that's fine and dandy, but that's nothing. That's not really where the magic is. Now the multi-mode is pretty cool, and that's what we're going to do next. What we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to slice it into some drum sounds. We go to loop slice. What this does is this slices my sample into sections. Okay, pretty cool. I mean, already out of the bat, it's now I could go through and I could try to trim these up a little bit more. I might try, you know what, I'm gonna trim up the first bass drum here, just to show you. I want to keep that one. We'll do this one. Okay, now let's get a sequence going. Now what we're doing now is this is still just one sample, and it's been sliced up for us into these little zones. Now I don't think I can change the individual pitches, unfortunately. That would be super slick, but when I go to pitch, see, it's more about the pitch of the whole sample. Can you hear that graininess though? Once we lower the tempo, that's where you really start to hear it. To get a sequence going, I'm just going to start with 4 on the floor. And hopefully I can get something recorded. Here we go. Okay, that's good enough for now. And let's see, we can change the tempo to 142 double time. Now I'm out of loop slice mode. If I come back over here to pitch, watch what happens. Oh, wrong one, sorry. And if I go to pitch, and I can't remember which button it is, but it's one of these two. Now, watch what happens. Anyways, so I really thought that was a really cool feature. And we could add some reverb. That to me is pretty darn cool. This is the Digitech Polara, by the way. It's a stereo reverb. It has lexicon reverb inside. Really cool kind of 80s style digital reverb. One of the things that I've always really loved was the digitized sounds of When the Levee Breaks that was taken from John Bonham. And I've actually got here on my SD card some old EMU samples, for example, that we can contrast with. So here from the drumulator. Oops, wrong one. There we go. So here's the bass drum sound, and let me grab the snare drum sound. And maybe you can hear. And I do believe that those are 12-bit kind of crunched samples themselves. They always have been. They originally showed up on the drumulator, which was a drum machine, but it used like samples, those sample sounds in its ROM. And then later on, EMU came out with the SP12, which was a drum machine and a sampler, I believe. And then it was the SP1200 that was strictly focused on sampling. So that is, I think, a really cool feature that this thing has. Is just being able we could actually possibly slow the tempo down at the same time. Not terribly easy to do manually, however. And if you're still here at the end of the video, I want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you found this interesting. And if you get your chance to get your hands on one of these things, I'd say probably you want to do that. A lot cheaper than getting the original, and I think it's going to be a lot more reliable than the originals at this point. It's definitely got a lot more features. I haven't even begun to scratch the surface on this thing. All right, y'all take care. Bye-bye. We'll see you next time.